Stars
Podcast. This is the
Let me talk to you. This is such good shit.
Who's ready to talk some pro wrestling? Yeah, me neither. Definitely not ready to talk about AEW, that's for sure. Sitting there watching Rampage on Saturday morning, and the only thing I keep thinking to myself the entire time that show's going on, who is this designed to appeal to? Because clearly it's not me. I don't know, man. Yeah, Rampage actually used to have a decent amount of material on it when they first launched the show late last year. It's like ever since the transition into the new year, it's like they've completely given up on even trying to make that show worthwhile. Like, seriously, I mean, unless you're like a diehard AEW fan that watches every bit of content you can, I have no idea what that show is even geared toward. I mean, they could barely draw half its regular Wednesday audience over to watching Friday night, so what's that really saying at the end of the day? But we're still going to talk about it, because you're not going to hear honest opinions or reports from other media outlets out there, so someone's got to call it like it is. I actually have heard reports and numerous media outlets that tried to make a case that last week's Rampage was a good show. Yes, the show that apparently drew less than 400,000 viewers at an 11:30 p.m. death time slot. A show filled with completely unmemorable, inconsequential matches that nobody remembered the minute the show was over. But apparently it was a good show. So, obviously I'm either out to lunch or I have completely different standards as to what passes as good professional wrestling. So, I don't know. Of course, that's where it all goes down. Here on the Five Starr Wrestling Report podcast. Here each Monday and Friday on YouTube and Rumble for new content and recaps. Of course, if you're new to the channel, smashing the subscribe button would be doing me a solid. And in addition, make sure to click the like button and leave a comment to share your thoughts on the material we covered today. In addition to Rampage, we are also going to be covering the NWA Crockett Cup from last week, technically. And we're going to be covering the second part of it. I'll explain. We'll get into it. For now, I'm going to dive in with the rundown on Rampage and get that out of the way because the NWA material actually has a decent amount to cover. And we'll try to make this one longer than 60 seconds. Still doesn't mean the show was worth more than a 60-second discussion, but there was at least a little more to talk about this week. So I have questions right out of the gate with this Lance Archer-Dustin Rhodes opener. Why am I supposed to care about a grudge match between these two from a match that happened almost 2 years ago when it's never been mentioned on TV until this past Wednesday? Why is Lance Archer still dragging out guys from the entrance tunnel? Particularly carrying out members of Dustin Rhodes' students who we've never seen before and have never been given any reason to care about. Why is Dan Lambert still affiliated with Lance Archer? Better yet, here's a question. Why is Lance Archer still a thing in AEW? No, I'm serious. What has Archer done in this company in the last 2 years to make him worth the financial investment? I'm trying to think back to any major career highlights for Archer in AEW worth talking about. The last 2 chain of events I remember with him in this company, he spiked himself on his head after a botched moonsault on television, which basically put him on the shelf for a couple months. And then he came back to television, was still a heel, despite them having a pretty good opportunity to turn him babyface after that moonsault incident. And then he lost a garbage mud show match to Hangman Page, and we never saw him again until this very show. And above all else, what makes this even more baffling, Archer ended up losing here to Dustin. I don't get it. I mean, the match wasn't horrible or anything. I've never considered myself a Lance Archer guy to begin with, but among the numerous other issues I had going into this match, I mean, I already kind of went into it just not giving a shit to begin with. And again, more of the same issues I have when it comes to AEW explaining storylines, especially ones that actually need context if they happened some time ago. Like, the commentators are sitting here during the match making all these passing references to spots and angles that happened in the Archer-Dustin match 2 years ago, like we're all just supposed to remember they happened. It'd be one thing if the match happened on a pay-per-view or it was some long-standing memorable rivalry that we were all emotionally invested in from the onset. But that wasn't the initial match. It was a random TV match during the empty arena era that no one was going to remember the week after it happened, much less 2 fucking years. Look at what, did they actually think I was going to go out of my way to watch the initial match again to catch up on story context? Fuck no! If it was that important, then show us a full replay of the match on TV. Or at least show some significant highlights instead of trying to cram it onto a 30-second pre-tape on Dynamite. Ain't nobody gonna remember that shit. It's just more of the same stop-and-start booking mentality when it comes to Tony Khan. You know, Lance Archer's been MIA since the Hangman Page match, but all of a sudden he just randomly shows up again, does a post-match heat angle with slamming Dustin through the timekeeper's table, and all of a sudden I'm supposed to care about him again? It's not how this works, guys. You want me to care about Lance Archer in AEW? Either book him in a meaningful program consistently, or have him appear on television more than once every other month, and maybe I'll have something to get invested in. Give me answers to all the questions I posed at the beginning. Like why him and Lambert are still a thing when it basically came out of the blue for no reason. What are Lance Archer's missions in AEW for 2022 and or the foreseeable future? Aside from blank statements like making sure everybody dies. God, what a stupid fucking quote. We had a super sad, super solemn promo with Jay Lethal, basically being at a career crossroads now that he's lost to Adam Cole and apparently has sank in the rankings. Yes, Jay Lethal is at a career crossroads after suffering 2 singles losses during his AEW run, and only after having signed with the company not less than 3 months ago, I think. But now he's completely directionless and has no idea where to go. Yep. And neither does Tony Khan, because he has no idea what he's doing. We had another great installment of WWE light level acting with the House of Black. It began with Fuego del Sol in the ring doing a horribly scripted out promo. And for those of you that have already forgot, yes, Fuego is the fake luchador from Mobile, Alabama that never wins matches and gets fucking mutilated in just about every segment he's involved with. So, guess what happened here? Well, Fuego's a moron, so he called out the House of Black to fight alone. All 3 members showed up in the ring with their designated spotlights and ominous poses, and then they killed Fuego. Epic. Also made more epic by the House of Black being confronted on the rampway by who, of all people? Yep, you guessed it. Evil Uno, Alex Reynolds, Johnny Hungy, and Stu Grayson of the Job Order. Oh, by the way, for the record, 4-on-3 advantage baby faces. But that's the least of our concerns at this point. So that's apparently going to be a thing now, huh? Fan-fucking-tastic. So after like 3 months of them being signed under the same roof, we finally get a regular Red Dragon tag match. No 6-man garbage, no multi-man gauntlet battle royal garbage, no Beta Bucks affiliated garbage, just Kyle O'Reilly and Bobby Fish in a normal tag team match on television. And it's against the job order, dorks. You can't win them all. And of course, even with something that we're intended to buy as an enhancement match, of course, they still have to let the job order idiots get a hot tag at the end. I honestly don't know what's worse at this point. Tony's infatuation with Orange Cassidy and the Best Friends, or his infatuation with the Dark Order. They're equally as indie and outlaw as they come, but I mean, at this stage, I almost kind of paint the job order as more infuriating to watch. A, because there's more of them in the group, so evidently there are times where I have to watch them more than one time on a show. This one, for example. And B, it's a faction that wasn't over from day fucking one, yet here we are in 2022 and they are still trying to make this a fucking thing. It's not even like a problem with the fact that most of them are just pure garbage in the ring, but it's more so the fact that they're just so over the top and so cartoonish that it's just ridiculous now. They're not funny, they're not amusing, every promo segment they're involved with is horribly performed. It's just another carbon copy of what makes the Beta Bucks segment so awful to watch. The bad acting, the high school level drama, the fact that no one in that group matters worth a damn to begin with. They all suck. They never win. They're completely futile in every way imaginable. But Tony's going to continue to pay them to be losers because why not? He's got the money to blow, so why stop now? Nyla Rose killed Maddie Renkowski in a squash. Maddie looked familiar too. I think I may have seen her do a couple job matches on NWA TV. Of course, she didn't get to do anything here, so whatever I remember her doing from the other program, none of it got a chance to shine here. And for the record, no, I cannot possibly give a shit about Thunder Rosa versus Nyla Rose for the women's belt. Nyla's another collective waste of space on that roster that I would have cut months ago, along with all the other D-level undercard women they've got under contract right now. Horrible performer. Among other issues. Well, didn't take too long for them to kill Hook's credibility, did it? Seriously, what in the fuck was that segment? QT Marshall and Aaron Solo present Hook with a fake certificate of accomplishment. Hook throws Aaron through the frame. QT stands there like an idiot. Hook leaves. And just when you thought it couldn't get any more retarded, who should come out but Danhausen? And again I ask, who the fuck is Danhausen? Better yet, I'll save the trouble. I don't care. And the main event for this dumb show was Swerve Strickland and Ricky Starks for the FTW title. Again, a belt that is still not recognized as a legit championship on AEW programming. So, we'll get to the completely screwed up finish in a minute, but as far as action goes, again, man, it's very similar to what I talked about in the last Swerve match a couple weeks ago. He can do a lot of athletically cool stuff, but at the end of the day, who cares? So can 85 to 90% of AEW's talent pool. They can all do flips and dives and Matrix-looking things with their bodies, and it looks impressive, it looks cool, but what makes Swerve any different from the rest of them? And I've been a big fan of Ricky Starks for ages now, but watching him in there with Strickland, he just, I don't know, kind of looked out of his element for a lot of it. And most of it was just both guys doing modern-day wrestling tricks for a while. There's a little bit of wrestling here and there, but There were no body parts worked. Most of it was very 50-50 back and forth, and it's one of those matches where you watch it, it ends, and, aside from the totally botched finish where Powerhouse Hobbs goes to wipe out Strickland outside the ring, yet the referee's watching him in plain view and doesn't call for the disqualification, what else is there to say? Strickland's, what is it, like second, third match on AEW TV now? He's already doing a job in a match for a fake belt. Like, if there was ever a match where a DQ or a count-out finish would have been a good call, this was it. Doesn't matter now, whatever. Yeah, I can see the bigger plan for Keith Lee to be the guy to win the FTW title at some point, which they kind of seem to be telegraphing in the afterbirth. But again, bro, it's the same issue I brought up at the beginning here. Keith Lee feuding over a fake, unrecognized championship in the undercard. That's your vision for Keith in AEW? That's why you brought this guy in, who actually had a little bit of steam coming off as a free agent after getting released from WWE? Hell of a vision, Tony. Meanwhile, your TNT champion is Scorpio fucking Sky for God knows what reason. And your world champion is a mid-card intercontinental champion cosplaying as your top babyface with your top belt. It's one thing to have long-term vision and plans for your roster, but there's a reason that plans change in wrestling. Sometimes that may not always be due to injuries. Sometimes guys capture fire unexpectedly and start to get over when you may not be anticipating it. And as a good wrestling owner, booker, and promoter, you should have the business sense to capitalize on those advantages when they're presented to you. Keith Lee is a guy that's red hot right now in your company. And, unlike Hook, who's newer and greener and, still needs to work on his character, Keith is a veteran who's at least put some time into the business. And the fact that you got him tangled up in your undercard tag program on your B show right now, that's a problem. It's a big problem. Because that fire's not going to last forever. People are going to start souring on him if they start to get the impression that Tony's not on board with him as a top guy. I don't know. Maybe he's not in Tony's vision to be a top world champion at some point. I don't know how his brain works. But Keith Lee ain't getting any younger. I don't know what he has planned for Keith down the road, but I sure hope it's something more better than this. Because this ain't cutting the mustard for me. All in all, it was certainly a better show than last week. What's that really saying at the end of the day? I continue to feel like I have more questions than answers when it comes to a lot of material on this program, and it tends to happen when you have an AEW show with no involvement from Punk and or MJF. It's amazing to me just how much of an imbalance there is on this show between those guys and the rest of the roster. But whatever, I've been down that road God knows how many times by now. Rampage is what it is at this point. And there's really no sense in getting hung up on things. You just watch the show, continue to ask questions that'll never get answered, and you move on to the next one. Simple as that. So with the way my schedule worked this weekend, there was no way I was going to have time to watch all 6 hours of the Crockett Cup. Typically, with the way the Crockett Cup usually works, keeping in tradition, the show is usually split into two separate shows anyway, with the first part being mostly the prelim tournament matches. So figuring that the semifinals and the finals were going to be happening on night 2, on top of the more featured matches, night 1 felt mostly skippable to me. So I ended up just watching night 2, which was already a 3-hour endeavor in and of itself. And that was probably all I was going to have enough time for over the weekend. And I still had to split the watch between 2 separate nights just because I ran out of time trying to watch the show in one sitting. So I know the show's kind of sort of old news by this point. I know they filmed another episode of Power in the last week, which I'll probably end up just skipping over and jumping on board with the following week for the next Monday show. But I'll just go over some general thoughts on the matches here. Shouldn't take all that long to run down everything. So, again, sorry for the slight delay on it, but it is what it is. They kicked the show off with Knox and Vsk versus the Briscoes in the semifinals. And factoring that Knox and Vsk ended up actually making it all the way to the semifinals of the 2022 Crockett Cup, it's probably a good thing I skipped over night one to begin with. No hate or anything, but let's just say the fact that Knox is getting as big of a push as he is in the NWA right now kind of goes to show just how dreary things are with that talent pool in the company. So obviously, anyone that's ever heard my commentary on the Briscoes in previous reports would know that I've never been their biggest fan. Watching for years in Ring of Honor, always thought they were a solid tag team, but they never really hit home with me in the ways that like the Kings of Wrestling or even Haas and Benjamin did. There was a period where they were doing their singles runs in like the mid-2010s, I think, where I was actually very intrigued with their work, especially when Jay was the world champion. As a team, I don't know, like I said, good team, but I always thought they were still a little too indie for my taste. And some of them may be problematic of the guys they've been paired with from time to time. They're definitely not a bad team, and I know Corny loves them to death. Having the opportunity to work with them up close and personal probably gives him a little bit of a natural built-in bias in favor of them. It is what it is. We all have different tastes. But this is a moderately decent tag match. Nothing blow away or super memorable, but didn't need to be. Most of it was a formality anyway. I don't think anyone actually thought Knox and Vsk were beating Mark and Jay Briscoe here. Good stuff with the Briscoes controlling the action early on, getting momentarily cut off for the heat after Knox ran in for a distraction. Short little comeback at the end after the hot tag, and they ended up going over with the Road Warriors Doomsday device, and that was pretty much that. The whole thing only went 10 minutes, if that. Not everything in wrestling needs to be a 15 to 20 minute back and forth spectacle where everyone kicks out of everything, especially not in the opener. Just keep it basic, give the people the big babyface win, and move on with the program. And immediately after that, we had the second semifinals match with Doug Williams and Harry Smith taking on La Rebellion. And as it turns out, that little botch from last week's Power Surge episode with Billy Corgan announcing Williams' mystery partner for the Crockett Cup, then when they put the graphic up on screen, it read Williams and Smith. Turns out Smith actually meant Harry Smith. Although I don't think I called him that. I think I called him David Hart Smith or something. Whatever he went by in WWE. Which really isn't that surprising if you think about it. And again, very similar formula to the opener in terms of the layout. At least for the first 2/3 of it. Faces controlling the action early on. La Rebellion cutting off Smith by chopping the knee and worked that over for a while. I'll say this too, because I think I mentioned this with the British Invasion match I watched a couple weeks back on TV. Doug Williams isn't a spring chicken anymore, but he's just as good in the ring now as when I watched him over a decade ago in TNA. Of course, a lot of that is mostly thanks to Doug being a smart ring worker and choosing not to do stupid flips and reckless bumps for the majority of his career. Maybe AEW ought to take notes. There was a suspect hot tag from the babyfaces right at the end, which would have given Cornette a conniption, with Williams tagging into the middle rope and not over the top rope, and the ref counted it as a legal tag. Bad call. Generally, I would say the match was going along fine up until the last couple minutes where it totally fell apart. And really, if you want to talk about the turning point, it kind of all started to go off the rails after that Williams tag through the middle rope. But between La Rebellion both being in the ring at the same time for 2 minutes straight, them completely fucking up a double team powerbomb spot in the corner where Bestia looked like he damn near killed Williams with driving his knee into the back of his head, things just totally went off the rails at the end. Baby faces got totally blown up. Everyone kind of got lost in terms of spots and transitions. It's what it really boils down to. It just fell apart. No need to really sugarcoat it. Smith ended up giving one of La Rebellion the front bulldog power slam from the top row for the win, which is a little bit of a shock, pinning the tag champs and all. That might set up a future championship match with those guys. And it also made for a pretty interesting final round, which I'll cover in a bit. Definitely the better call to put Williams and Smith over here. La Rebellion is another team that just hasn't hit home with me in the NWA. With that kind of ring style NWA goes for, they always just kind of felt like an outcast trying to bring the lucha style to their matches. It doesn't work. And they haven't gone too overboard with the absurdity of the whole thing, but it does kind of make their matches unpredictable in terms of how they gel with their opponents. Like if they'd have done this same kind of match with, say, OGK, for example, who are a little quicker on their feet and can adapt to that faster style, maybe this would have come off better, but, Williams and Smith are pretty old school in terms of what they do in the ring. A lot of this just ended up being a clash of styles at the end of the day. But, it is what it is. Up next was the national heavyweight title match between Jack Stane and Anthony Not Crimson Mayweather. I still can't believe they're trying to get over the Dane event. It's one of those cringe deals where it borders right on the edge of being funny and not funny at the same time. And I'm not really sure which way to lean on it. Anyway, this ended up being a pretty interesting little match / angle. Basically, it broke down into two parts. The first part was both guys doing a normal wrestling match with Crimson getting his leg work over from the majority of it and trying to milk the Valiant comeback at the end. And that was all good for the most part. The Undertaker's suicide dive from Mayweather almost ended horribly. Probably could have done without that spot. But Mayweather ended up quickly tapping out Dane with the cross armbar. And they did a little swerve after the match where they kept the camera on Dane in the corner, who began winking at the camera and smiling. So he ended up completely no-selling all the effects of the match so that he could go jump Mayweather in the crowd. And while he's beating him down, he throws Mayweather back into the ring, tells Kyle Davis that he's cashing in his title opportunity against Mayweather. Because that's apparently still a thing that's been going on in the NWA. The Phantom Money in the Bank deal where I think along with Jack Stane, Pope and Velvet Sky also have guaranteed title shots, which stems from a championship series they held way back last year. So far back that I don't even remember watching it happen. So it must have happened early summer or even spring of 2021. So Dane ended up tossing Crimson back in, hit him with the lariat, and he won the national heavyweight title in about 15 seconds after the opening bell. I don't know. It was a clever angle, I guess. We've seen just about every company try to rip off Money in the Bank in some manner, and most of the time it always comes off so Bush League. I guess my question with the way they did this whole thing is, if management knew that Jack Stane still had a guaranteed championship match of his choosing that he hadn't cashed in yet, why would they sanction a title match on pay-per-view if he wasn't voluntarily cashing in on that contract? Wouldn't that have needed to be run by Billy Corgan in the case that Jack Stane tried to pull a stunt like this here? I mean, he's a heel. It's a decent enough segment, though. This feud's lost a good amount of steam, though, in the last couple months. Again, part of the problem has a lot to do with NWA's convoluted taping schedule and the fact that a lot of their key programs take a backseat from time to time. Same thing I talked about with the Tom Latimer-Nick Aldis feud from their I Quit match. After the whole angle they filmed on the TV show with Aldis splitting from Strictly Business, that entire program kind of fell off the map in pretty much the late fall last year, and it wasn't really followed up on well. Same exact thing with the Mayweather-Jack Stane thing. I remember watching them have a cage match, but by now we're talking like, what, 3 or 4 months ago? And like I said, this isn't a program that they've been really constantly revisiting on TV. So it's like, here it is on pay-per-view 4 months after the fact, and I don't know, didn't have the same amount of steam, I guess. The Kenzie Page, Ella Envy versus Allison Kay, Marty Bell tag match was not good at all. And I really don't have a whole lot to say about it aside from that. The 4-way to crown the junior heavyweight champion, Homicide, Colby Corino, Darius Lockhart, and Austin Aries. It was fine. I like the little mindfuckery heel games that Aries and Homicide were playing with each other throughout the match. Kind of one of those can you top this deals where they'd hit the baby faces with moves and try to one-up the other. It's a good little old school heel versus heel angle that works. I also appreciated Aries poking fun at Corino in this match, saying he looks like a 2005 replica of himself. See? What'd I tell you? I ain't crazy. I know Aries is a whole polarizing character in and of himself. Like, I know he has a bad reputation in the business. He's kind of a douchebag. I've always considered myself an Austin Aries fan, though. And believe it or not, like, some of my favorite TNA moments actually involve Aries being at the forefront of the title picture. Like, I still have vague memories of him winning the world title, some of the stuff he did with Bobby Roode, the X Division title reign. He's had some pretty great career moments. He's always been a good promo. He's a solid worker. I mean, say what you want about the guy, but I don't know. He's had a lot of good career moments, be it in Ring of Honor or in TNA. If anything, I was shocked that Aries didn't win the belt here. Homicide ended up hitting Corino with that cop killer thing he does to win, which makes me shudder every time I see it. But, I mean, the dude's done the move for ages now. Like, if anyone's going to put their trust in someone to deliver a safe cop killer, Homicide's probably the guy I'd put my faith in. It was a decent little 4-way, though. Yeah, multi-mans aren't my thing in wrestling, but it didn't get horribly messy or clunky at any point. A lot of the junior heavyweight division build has happened on that NWA USA show, so I wasn't all that familiar with the backstory heading into this thing. I don't know how much of it is going to be carried over on the regular power shows, but I guess we'll see what they do with it now that they actually have a champion for the division. We had the 3-way women's title match, Chelsea Green, Kylie Ray, and Camille, which was better than the women's tag match for sure. It was actually pretty good, given it was a 3-way. And again, I usually hate multi-person matches in wrestling anymore. And this one featured women too, which was an uphill battle in and of itself. Last couple minutes were particularly good though. Camille still looks like $1 million, and like I mentioned before, I've definitely seen the progression with her ring work in the last couple years. You know, when she first started as a wrestler, she was fucking awful. But she's done a hell of a job in the last year, taking the time to really work on the basics, learn facials, learn the monster heel style, and get a lot more confident in the ring consistently. Hard work pays off, what can I tell you? Her selling still needs a lot of work, but that'll come with time. Of course, Camille retaining wasn't all that surprising. I still think it's too early for them to be taking the strap off of her, especially with where they are in terms of credible babyface challengers right now. Chelsea Green still doesn't do it for me. I've talked about that before. But Kylie Ray, I've been on record putting her over from time to time. I think she's the one that has the history of retiring every other week and a half, which kind of makes it hard to put stock in her for any long-term booking. But she's a good athlete from everything I've seen from her. Good basics, good look, good facials. Again, like the whole Bayley knockoff gimmick is still kind of weird to me, but it's also not so completely over the top where it just turns ridiculous. Like one of my favorite parts of the match, actually, there was a really cool spot toward the end where Camille and Kylie hit a double team move on Chelsea, and after they went to high five each other, Kylie gave Camille a pretty decent looking super kick. Then she started mocking her with her tongue sticking out, and it actually got a moderately decent pop from the crowd. So, yeah, she's got something. She did a pretty decent looking double crossface submission to Camille and Chelsea too, and it didn't look too bad. I think I've said it before, I don't know what the plan is for where they go as terms of like a viable challenger to beat Camille for the women's belt, but if Kylie's the one to do it at some point, I wouldn't be opposed to it. She's a strong worker, seems to be pretty over with the crowd. So as long as they could trust that she's not going to randomly disappear from the company in 6 months or try to flake out, like we've seen her do in places like AEW or Impact in the last few years, I could get behind Kylie Ray as the one to beat Camille for the belt. Why not? Tyrus and Rodney Mack for the world's television title was interesting. It kind of worked at like a standard MMA match for a lot of it. I guess a lot of that comes from Rodney's background training. It was different. I'll give it that. Tyrus's matches have a reputation for being monotonous and slow, but, especially in today's era of wrestling, like the slugfest big man style is almost a breath of fresh air when you see it. Probably one of the real low points of the show if you want to analyze the entire card, and I wouldn't argue that. Of course, I've watched a good handful of, quote, boring matches with some of these classic shows I watch every week, so, it wasn't going to offend me either way. Tyrus retaining, again, not all that surprising. I am still kind of curious where they're going with him and Scion, if that's still a thing that they're experimenting with. Kind of feels like they're deliberately separating those two for the time being, which I don't really know what to make of that. Like, if they don't go with the mask versus title thing, I think that's kind of a missed opportunity. Especially with them running with the theme of trying to figure out the masked identity of Scion. It's a cool little story. By the way, side note here, I think I figured out what's going on with Aaron Stevens after like 4 months of being confused as to what his character is. He's lost his fucking mind. Yeah, that's my radical conclusion. Write that one down. So then we get the real highlight of the 2022 Crockett Cup. David fucking Crockett. He's back, and he's here to provide commentary. Like it's 1986 all over again. I'm watching David Crockett in real time with the Pope and Joe Galley calling the finals of the 2022 Crockett Cup. And I can assure you it was just as magical an experience as you would imagine it would be. He's calling it like it's the mid-'80s all over again. Sounds just the same too, even though he's significantly heavier now. And grayer. And just to reiterate, in case you've already forgotten, the finals are Doug Williams and Harry Smith versus the Briscoes. And let me just say this for the record. Never in my entire life would I have ever thought that David Crockett would be calling a Briscoes match. But, well, here we are. But David was not the only highlight of the match. Like I said before, man, never been a big Briscoes guy, but this was a hell of a match. In my opinion, this was the best pairing for the finals of the tournament. It was well-paced. It was well-worked. For the first time in a long time, I actually felt like I was watching a real tag match with actual tag wrestling and actual tag rules being implemented from beginning to end. Fucking sucks that modern wrestling has totally lost the plot of what traditional tag wrestling used to be. And you have the Beta Bucks and their trampoline bullshittery to thank for that one. What I really liked about it, though, is that they managed to work a real effective babyface versus babyface story. The Briscoes were clearly the more over team here, but the crowd didn't necessarily heel Williams and Smith like you'd think. A lot of it was back and forth, and that was fine. It progressed. It actually built as the match went along in terms of drama. They didn't go balls to the walls 30 seconds in and kill their steam before it ever had a chance to get going. It did get a little messy at the end there with all four guys being in there, but at least it was something that happened toward the finish instead of happening throughout the entire match like you see in AEW. Some good false finishes that were actually warranted given the stakes here. And the finishes, Smith and Williams getting bumped, Jay got the Jay Driller on Williams, which didn't look the cleanest in the world, but I mean, Doug Williams isn't going to be taking a straight cranium bump at his age. And then Mark hit the flying elbow for the 3. Great conclusion. People really popped for the finish. And the Briscoes got the pose with the trophy afterwards. I don't know where it all goes or whether they stick around long term, but I hope they do. Yeah, I think Mark and Jay would be a real solid addition to the tag division in the NWA. And if AEW is basically handcuffed by executives at TBS where Tony can't sign the Briscoes, NWA would be a perfect fit for them. Yeah, let's be frank. AEW would fuck up Mark and Jay like they fucked up FTR. They'd be fed to the beta bucks in the first 6 months and they'd cease to matter anyway. I know that's a dream match people have been craving to see with the Briscoes and FTR, and hey, if that match ended up happening under an NWA roof, sure, why not? At this point, I still don't even know why Dax and Cash are even working for AEW at this point. With how horribly treated and how inconsequential they've been for God knows how long, I wouldn't be shocked if they dipped out from AEW when their contracts ran out. They clearly always look like they don't want to be there. Or maybe it's just involving themselves with the Beta Bucks. And the main event was Matt Cardona and Nick Aldis for the NWA World's Heavyweight title with special guest ref Jeff Jarrett. That's right. JEFFJARRETT. Jeff Jarrett. Sporting the old TNA theme, which brought back a lot of memories. Have I ever talked about the whole Jarrett thing? I don't know if I have. I'll say this. I've watched Jeff Jarrett for years. And if you asked me the simple question, who, in your honest opinion, is the single most overpushed wrestler in the history of the business that you still question to this day why it ever happened to begin with? Jeff Jarrett's the poster boy. Whether it was his run in the dying days of WCW as the world champion or the excessive force of him in the main event picture in TNA, I've always had a love-hate relationship with the guy. Great wrestler, definitely works the old school style that I grew up appreciating. But it kind of goes along with what I talked about with Hangman Page a while ago. I don't think there are too many guys in the history of the business that screamed mid-card Intercontinental Champion, yet still ended up finding numerous ways to constantly be forced into a main event world title picture like they were ever on that level to begin with than Jeff Jarrett. Maybe you throw a guy like Cody Rhodes into that equation as a modern-day comparison. No hate on him. I don't have any ill will toward the guy, but you know, when you think back to why TNA failed as a company over a decade ago, whatever you want to say about Panda Energy or Dixie Carter or Spike TV execs, yes. TNA failed due to a conglomeration of those things. But you still can't have that conversation without putting partial blame on the way that Jarrett allowed that company to function from day to day. Just something to think about. I'll put him over in this regard. He's a better official than anyone in AEW. At least he has the balls to call out bullshit when he sees it. Now, of course, as soon as Jarrett made the announcement during the ring intros that he's going to call it straight down the middle and he wants a classic NWA title match, as soon as those words left his mouth, there were more red flags going off than you'd see in a Chinese communist parade. You don't have to tell me twice, dude. I know my history. I hear classic NWA title match. First word that comes to my mind is screw job. And that's exactly what the fuck happened. And as far as action goes, I mean, they pretty much worked it like a standard heel champion versus babyface challenger main event. You know, Cardona ducked and dodged for a lot of it, tried to avoid all this by any means necessary. There was a point where he tried to get himself intentionally counted out, but Jarrett said that the match ends when he does. I love the part here where Cardona started getting into a shoving match with Jarrett in the ring, and Velvet once again attempted her damnedest to be mad. Her quote, and I'm not kidding with the tonality here, "Man, that's really starting to piss me off." Very menacing. It's actually kind of funny if you think about it for a minute. We talk about how David Crockett was so great back in the day for just being a super mark for the baby faces and just absolutely detesting everything the heels did. Velvet Sky is pretty much the female Dave Crockett in today's commentary. She absolutely despises everything Matt Cardona does as the heel champion. She marks out anytime the babyfaces gain the upper hand, and she calls it like a casual wrestling fan circa 1985. I've turned the table on Velvet. I used to hate her commentary, but she's won me over. They did an extended heat sequence in here with Cardona working over Aldis and trying to mock Jarrett at the same time. That worked out well. Corso, you can't have a classic NWA title match without the good old dusty finish. So it ends up breaking down into pandemonium at the end. The cavalry end up running out. Cardona's crew ran out to try and run interference, which of course spawned Doug Williams and Harry Smith to run down to make the save. And while all the men are brawling outside the ring with Jarrett standing in the ring trying to yell at everyone to go to the back, that's when Chelsea Green ran in from behind and low-blowed Jarrett. And Mickie James ends up running in and dumping Chelsea. And this is actually really well done with the way they filmed it, because Jarrett had his back turned the entire time when Chelsea was in the ring. But as soon as Mickie dumped Chelsea out, Jarrett had caught sight of Mickie peripherally, which gave him the visual perspective that Mickie was the one that cock-blocked him. So Aldis gets in there, ends up locking in the cloverleaf on Cardona for the submission, but when Jarrett calls for the bell, he makes the decision that Cardona is the winner via DQ because of the groin shot that he thought that Mickie gave to him. It's a clever little finish there. And now comes the real story follow-up, where we find out that Jarrett was in cahoots with Cardona's group the whole time. And what better way to bring everything full circle in 2022 and make it all about Jeff Jarrett? Got to get that young generation over, am I right? I like this main event, though. The dusty finish, it can be used in moderation and actually means something of value when it's done well. And this was one of those cases where I think the execution made perfect sense. It builds to a rematch down the road between Aldis and Cardona when the time's right. But it also throws a little wrinkle into the Trevor Murdoch equation, because he actually did a promo earlier in the show where kind of looked like he was teasing a little bit of a heel turn. It was essentially staking his claim that he doesn't give a shit right now. He's got nothing else to lose, and his main mission is to get back the world title. So if by happenstance him and Aldis cross paths, Murdoch's going to make sure that he takes care of Aldis to get back the belt. So lots of possibilities that can stem from that. And I'm intrigued to see what direction they go. Sure, a lot more attention-grabbing of a title picture than what AEW is doing with Mid-Carter Page. Last two matches definitely saved the show from being a total letdown. Crockett Cup finals and the main event were very good for their own distinct reasons. And while this might come off as a shock for some people, I thought that three-way women's title match was real solid. There's some strong stuff here from the NWA. And if you actually appreciate the style of wrestling that they do, you can understand why I enjoy this product as sort of my niche watch. For everything that AEW is to the moves marks, NWA is everything I love about what traditional old-school wrestling used to be when it actually drew money and knew how to work the fans the right way. Now, yes, there are always going to be moderations and adaptations that come with the territory that I'm maybe not a huge fan of. But, the last two matches on the card here are representations of how great wrestling can still be when you book things logically and you involve wrestlers that know what they're doing. And I'll tip my hat to him. I will credit Matt Cardona here. He's not what you would classify as someone I go out of my way to watch. He's had some pretty garbage match showings with some of the outlaw stuff I've seen him do in GCW and Impact in the year. But he had a good showing here against Nick. So, overall, I would highly encourage everyone to check out the last two matches if you appreciate good, classic, old-school pro wrestling. Rest of the show, you could probably take or leave. Maybe if you like women's wrestling, check out the three-way. Anyhow, that'll about do it for this one. Thanks for tuning in, and again, make sure to subscribe, like the show, and leave a comment to help me out here in the YouTube algorithms in particular. Share your thoughts down below, and make sure you come back this Friday to check out the Friday episode for the Dynamite and Retro Review continuation. Thanks for stopping in. Take care. Peace.